Graphic design? Can you make a living at that?
3, 2, 1, fun.
Welcome to Design Futures, a show about what happens after design school. I'm Chris St. Cyr, and my guest on this episode is Glen Carlson. How are you?
It's good to see you. How are you? Yeah, good to see you.
I'm good. Glen is an experienced design director at Metabolon, where he creates usable product experiences for internal clients. Additionally, he's worked on projects for Adobe, Cisco, and the University of Washington. He has an MBA from the University of Phoenix and is a 2005 graduate of the University of Denver, way back in the Denver days. Yeah, do you remember that far back?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You have to go through the journals.
You know, I was actually digging around up in my attic trying to find some actual printed pieces and other things that I could maybe show. And yeah, I found some stuff from back then. I didn't bring it down, but I did find some journals and sketchbooks and stuff.
One thing I did learn when I was looking at your website was that you were the founding or co-founder of the AIGA student group. Is that right?
Yeah, that was actually really cool experience. Yeah, I was really gung-ho about that. I think it was kind of out of a desire to see that we were working towards gainful employment.
Sure.
You know, coming out of school with an arts degree, and you wanted to have a portfolio and kind of a way of approaching the world and kind of making sure that you were able to translate that into work. And so yeah, I started the AIGA student group, and it was mainly a way for me to make posters and like recruit some people. It was mostly about like getting portfolios together. We also organized a show. We did a show. I was a co-curator of the student gallery with Larry. We organized a show for the design kids.
Was that Gallery 23 or Gallery
Yep.
O23? Is that?
Oh yeah, that's the important O23. That was actually another great experience, conceptualizing shows, both to like put your own work into, but then also we did a lot of work with outside artists.
Yeah. Were you involved in any other like non-art and design activities while you're at DU?
Oh yeah, I played ACHA Division II hockey.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, I don't think those worlds really overlap too much.
So that's where we met. You were in a couple classes. I mean, that was so long ago. I can't even remember what the name of those classes were. Probably like a web design or a sophomore design course. So that was Denver. And did you go to Arizona right after school?
Yep.
What was your path to get to where you are now? You were out in the West for a while, and then you.
Yeah, it was all around sort of the western half of the U.S. So yeah, I was born in Santa Cruz, California. I grew up in the Bay Area. Fleetingly thought that I might delay going to college to join one of those startups in like 2000, but then everything crashed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this place is dead anyway. It's never going to come back.
Now look at it. Right?
Yeah, right. I should have just set up shop. Yeah. But anyway, went out to Denver for college, and then moved down to Phoenix area. And then again, got kind of caught up in a little bit of a bubble there, the housing bubble.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So stayed there for a little bit longer than I maybe wanted to. I really kind of, I guess, cut my teeth, so to speak. Working there is an interesting scene. Phoenix is such a large area. The business community and the design community was very intimate. Everybody knew, like, it was like a handful of people, seemed like, at least. Around 2015, moved out to North Carolina.
Yeah, and that's where you are now,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And did you move there for the job at Metabolon?
I don't know if it was like necessarily semi-random, but it was just a confluence of things. Economically, like the housing market sort of recovering, and so being in a place where could sell a house and move. And so looking at places where I might want to put down roots or kind of live for a while. And the sort of triangle area of North Carolina kept popping up. The area really reminded me a lot of the Bay Area, honestly, in terms of the mix of really high tech and university driven development. And it reminded me of the Bay Area when I was growing up there.
Uh-huh.
So it's a huge rural to urban connection that
Mhm.
I really enjoyed.
And
So,
so
yeah.
you're working as UX designer or design director. Were you doing UX at your previous job?
Yes. Well, yes and no. I always ended up doing UX work, mainly because I knew how to deal with the technology a lot and I thought that way. And so a lot of times projects that would come in. So I'd been working at agencies a lot before this. And so whenever we would have work that would come in that would be UX driven or have a UX component, I would be working on it. This is, I guess, the first job where I'm actually really implementing a comprehensive UX plan, or like
Yeah.
really driving UX or CX as a philosophy.
Yeah. Can you, what's CX?
CX is basically UX for sales guys or more business minded people, I guess. It's really just X. Like it's just experience. It's
Right.
experience design. And so when, I'm engaging with the leadership or, the sales part of the organization, they get CX. If I'm talking in those terms a lot more
Right.
than if
Right.
I start breaking out like, oh yeah, UX driven this and that.
What's a user? The customer. The
Yeah.
customer.
Well, yeah, you start saying UX and everybody's like, oh, an app? You're talking about an app? And it's like,
Right.
No, not really.
I remember when we talked a little while ago, you were explaining what Metabolon does, and I kind of got it towards the end of our conversation, and then preparing for this conversation, I was reading a little bit more, so I think I have it. But what's like the brief explanation of what the company does?
This is a lot of the work that I've been doing lately is sort of trying to really concisely position what we do
Mhm.
to an audience, and in an audience that's not thoroughly like academic. So, and honestly, we really need that little DNA guy from Jurassic Park.
I love that guy.
But basically, so I think everyone kind of might know what metabolism is. It's related to that. So as you are living, your body's doing and breaking down things into small molecules, and metabolomics is the measurement of those small molecules. So what we're measuring is the smallest of small things that are happening, sort of the end result. So like if, I don't know if you were drinking coffee or tea right there, but if you were to take a blood test, we could see a metabolite of the caffeine from the tea that your body is breaking down in that snapshot. We convert that, it's actually kind of analog style data into a more of a digital format. We do historical data matching and library matching to kind of clean up the noise and identify what molecules and what compounds are actually present. And then we do interpretation. So on top of that, so we have scientists that interpret that, as well as we have AI, machine learning, other sorts of things that kind of like make connections and help interpret what's going on. It's biological big data.
Yeah, I feel like I just got a degree. I read the article that you wrote. You had on Medium, and it was sort of written in a way about talking about like learning, like you have to learn some of these things, and
Yes.
then the scientists, sort of how they understand things and the scientific method. And so I just thought there's some phrases that I pulled out that I thought were really helpful to understand kind of what your company does and how you relate to that kind of science. I think this is from the beginning of it. It's like, how do you design software that displays and validates the existence of small molecules present among sample cohorts ranging in number from 1 to 1,000 plus, varying in type from human whole blood to dolphin urine? Yes, this was a real use case. It's a challenging task for trained biochemists, and it's especially intimidating if your educational background primarily consists of a fine arts degree. So how much did you have
I
to
didn't
read
mean to
about this?
downplay my fine arts degree.
How much did you have to learn about this science to really, be
I,
grounded in your job? Like it sounds like it's pretty
so
intense.
I think the important part is I had to learn enough to know how to relate. And really, my job wasn't having to learn everything because that's
Right.
like
Yeah.
I go get a PhD, right? My job was to understand the people in my cohort of people, which is one of the reasons why I was really psyched about the position is my users were there. Like my main user cohort were the people that were working there. When I was doing UX work for like agencies, to do a full, truly UX driven methodology or really get after a project and do it sort of quote unquote right, you got to do a lot of research. You got to do a lot of interviews and reaching out and testing and meet your people, right? Meet the people who are going to be using it. In an agency format, you just don't always have the time, resources, whatever to do that. And so you kind of have to like guess, you have to make models, you have to have stand-ins, use your best judgment, that kind of thing. And at the end of the day, it's kind of whatever your client likes and
Yeah.
wants to go with, you have to take that into account. And so with this, it's like, well, my users are here and I can implement my my methodologies how I kind of want to, and really get to know the people. Being able to literally sit and be over someone's shoulder watching their workflow and asking, get that real live embedded experience of them using tools that I'm then going to try to redesign.
Yeah, I want
um,
to I want to show one of those that you're talking about, like dots on a screen and controls. So is this real
Veiling.
data in here
It's
or
not
close
real
to it?
data, but I took a screenshot of what the real data looks like and mocked it up. I actually had to go look at how our software integrates the mass spec peaks and then reproduce it how I would want to change it
Yeah.
in the software design. The names of everything and kind of the client codes and all that, those are all real-ish.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had to develop a capability to do high fidelity prototyping very quickly.
So what are you using to prototype?
So I use Adobe XD for
Yeah.
prototyping. Yeah.
Let's transition to this. So this is
Mhm.
rebrand of the company.
Sure. So we went through a leadership transition, brought a new CEO on board, brought some new people into leadership, and kind of created their vision of what they wanted to do with the company. And it was actually very much in line with what we were already doing on the informatics and sort of data side of things, and trying to transition this sort of like largely academic focused company to be more of a commercial leader, looking towards just updating everything because it was starting to feel a bit dated, and to really have a system in place.
It definitely looks fresh and vibrant and alive.
Yeah, I mean, the previous identity was very much like designed to look like I don't know, like a therapeutic company maybe,
Mhm.
or like a kind of a more conservative drug company. And then yeah, just trying to be a lot more bold with our expression. I'm really interested in building out systems. Again, this connects, I think, to that user experience or experience design type of thinking, not just developing a logo or a mark, but trying to develop a fully functional system that can flex and kind of adapt to whatever we're working on at the moment or in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and it says here it was a whole 12-month process. Was
It's one of those things with working in house. It actually takes sometimes a little bit longer to develop and sell internally your ideas. This took some effort to, well, it didn't take that much effort to persuade people that, we wanted to ditch the old logo. Well, okay, how are we going to go about replacing it was the harder part. That took some time, and then developing a rationale. It wasn't just the mark. That's the other thing. Like, we had to develop, again, with a new leadership team, a whole new vision and leadership vision for the future, and make sure that this all aligned. You see those headlines of company rebrands and it costs $50 million or something like that. And they're like, $50 million for a logo. No, it's a whole suite of things.
I go back here to some of your other projects. So there's this other one, Carolina Masters, you have on your Dribble.
So this is a crew club that is out of Chapel Hill area. My wife rows for them, so that's how I.
Okay, I was gonna say, do you
got
row?
involved with that. But it was very fun. It was one of those things that I was neck deep into software design at the time. And I'm like, I need a mark to work on. Like, I'm so sick of trying to translate things from like Excel into into design. And so she was like, yeah, we're doing some new apparel orders, and we're thinking about, why don't we just change the logo? And I was like, all right, yeah, let's do it. When I first started, I was like, my muscles had kind of atrophied a little bit, but then they came back real strong, I think. Yeah, I really like the process for this one. It's got, both the mark, the C, and the oars. I was definitely thinking, what is going to look good, or what's going to really pop off of pieces of apparel. The penny pack was actually a really interesting project. Yeah, so that was a project that actually kind of stemmed out of, I'd met this guy through work. Actually, he was our sort of interim VP of marketing. Well, his daughter actually kind of like spearheaded this, and so she had this idea to help adolescent girls with their first period experience and learning about their bodies and that kind of stuff. So it included, I think, some personal stories. You basically get a kit, a box of stuff. So it's kind of like a drop ship type thing, and then it combines with this app. And so I worked on prototyping out the app so it could be developed, and then doing some of this branding, doing some of the more fun things behind it too. Like, we developed these trading cards for like female heroes. It was interesting. This piece or this kit got featured in a design pop-up at the MoMA in New York. And I was like, my work made it to the MoMA.
Nice. Check that off the list.
Yeah.
Right? So we were talking about your position and where you are now. Can you talk about your team or your role, like the business side of, like, how is that all organized?
I'm kind of in a unique position, and part of that is how I've developed it, but also part of it is just circumstance. So when I first joined, I was very much within what was called the informatics division, which was the internal software development and sort of data visualization. That side of the business grew a lot, and because we touched a lot of parts of the business, and so as we grew, a lot of the resources that may have been developed or may have been devoted to me, because like the original plan was to kind of like build out the department and have a handful of developers, a project manager, and a UX or UI person. But we had such a time of just transitioning some of our products that the people that may have been devoted to my headcount went to development because they needed more engineers.
Right.
I was producing work at a rate that was not being consumed as readily. So I would kind of like prototype out a tool and then hand it off, and it would become part of the development roadmap. I would go through these cycles of being really overloaded, but then having sort of a little bit of lulls. Okay, I've handed off my project. What's the next thing? And then, like I said, we had this leadership transition and this need on the marketing side. And I started moonlighting a
Yeah.
little bit and sort of having like a little bit of a half and half role, but I was still reporting up through the informatics side. Eventually, the informatics department got incorporating so many other sides of the business that my management reporting just sort of switched over to marketing. I kind of touch a lot of parts of the business. I'm technically on both the informatics R&D team and the marketing team.
And
Um,
as a director, do you have people that you supervise, like other designers or UI or UX people?
I will, and I have, and I've overseen projects and directed projects. It's mostly directors in terms of like leadership and my role in terms of being able to set strategy
Uh-huh.
and make decisions for certain products. When I started out, I was my job title was UX UI lead, and then that transitioned recently with the work that I was doing on the brand. As like sort of my role within the company touched more and more things, I just started making more of a case that I needed to take on this larger role of addressing experience design throughout the company.
You're at this director level and you've been out of school a while. Can you give us a range of like what your salary is at this point in your career?
I'm between 130 and 150 with a bonus structure and some stock options.
I mean, you mentioned a whole lot of things. Are there things that stand out or that you can remember from your education that you wish that you had learned those things, or you wish that college had given you certain challenges that you now experience?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, I felt pretty prepared. I think just that like real world, like what a project looks like in the real world, because it doesn't come to you on a plate, sometimes, or on a syllabus, right?
Right.
And I mean, I know that kind of sounds like very simple, like of course, like I think what I could have really maybe used was, how do you make work for yourself, or how do you make your work for yourself? Because that's what I feel like, I'm really starting to find a groove on now, is like working on the stuff that I want to be working on, and
Right.
to kind of like make the work, or set the terms of your work a little bit more, or how do you not just let the work come to you. If you're working at an agency, it's other people's jobs to go out and get the work, right?
Right.
It's your job to maybe pitch on it, or to develop the concepts and to defend them, but you learn that in school. I think where I started to really transition in terms of like my professionalism was to be in an ambiguous environment, and to be able to take that ambiguous environment and say, this is what I think we should be doing.
So you're
you know
advocating for yourself.
yeah, and to make a project out of where there might not have been one, or may not have been obvious one. And so when I started, I really threw myself into it. I introduced myself to everybody in the company, and nobody's telling me to do this. Nobody's sort of saying like, this is what you need to do to be successful, or this is what you need to do, again, as part of the course or part of the syllabus. This is the methodology, or the assignment. But I knew if I wanted to get the outcome, and if I wanted to work on things that were interesting to me, I had to make it happen. In terms of getting to that director level, that's kind of where that comes in, is you need to be prescriptive. You need to be making decisions. And in school, you make decisions, but it's within the confines of the outline that is set out for you. And I get that. I mean, that you have to have assignments. It was interesting, and I still remember this in the intro to creativity class at DU. The one project that really kicked my ass was, we were doing these projects, very assigned, like carve a thing out of soap, do a thing with acrylics. It was elective, type of thing for other people, right? So we were doing all these sort of like really basic formative stuff, creative projects, and then I think it was maybe like the midterm, or one of, after we had done a couple, the professor was like, okay, now you can do anything.
And you're
And I was like,
frozen.
at first I was like, all right, yeah, I'm gonna nail it. Like I'm so creative. I'm just like, full of myself, as I started trying to wrap my head around it or like figure out what to do, I was grasping. I was like,
Yeah.
I put together the worst piece. I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed by it. That sort of thing of questioning the work, questioning the assignment. Part of the design sprint methodology that I've been implementing within the company is to get at those sort of assumptions and try to get people out of their modes of thinking and to try to take on those ambiguous situations, to really exalt the creative process as very much equal to the scientific method
Right.
as
Oh
like a
yeah.
valid way to solving problems. And in terms of how to integrate that into design education, I don't know. I mean, when I think back on it, the projects or the things that really I think I made the most progress on in terms of developing it into a professional were actually some of the internships I remember in one of your classes, you actually brought in some nonprofits and we actually did real live work with real live clients. You can't replicate that, the sort of unpredictability of like dealing with a client. Like
Right.
you can't
You don't know what they're going to say or how they're going to respond. It's,
yeah.
they're not the
Yeah, like
teacher.
you
Yeah.
could critique it all day long. Like you can give yourself a pat on the back, say that's an A project, but if the client doesn't like it, again, like you gotta deal with that. You gotta like find a middle ground where you're happy with it and the client's happy with it.
Right.
Or you need to develop those skills of being able to quote unquote manage the client or bring them along with you on your creative process so that they do see your brilliance.
Or where you are now, it's like involving them in the whole process, not
Yes.
necessarily bring
Yeah,
them along to show them what you're doing in every phase, but to involve them in every phase so they have ownership of it, right? Like that's part of that user experience way of thinking, of bringing people in at the early stages. The thing that I really enjoy about hearing you talk about it and the areas that I teach in too is talking about the user experience process with students and having them understand that involving the client or involving the client's audience is going to make the thing that you're making that much stronger, rather than at the end it's like big reveal of this beautiful poster, right? It's like, there's a lot of that in design, and user experience is certainly different in that way.
It's a little bit of a harsh reality that as designers, we want everybody to see the brilliance of design and like appreciate the aesthetics. But really, I mean, the aesthetics is one part of it. It's a little bit of anthropology and it's a little bit of aesthetics. But in terms of getting things done, it's tempting to basically wall off the garden a bit and be like, okay, I'm going to take what you say sort of at face value, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to go do my thing. And then I'm going to show you this brilliant design piece and you're going to be wowed by it. And that doesn't
I'm
always,
awesome.
doesn't always happen because a lot of times the objectives that you're being given are being given by a person who doesn't necessarily always understand the real problem or the real, not to say that every client doesn't understand what they're doing, but it's your job as a designer to investigate that, to probe that and to question it and to figure out what the actual problem is from the design viewpoint. A philosophy that I follow is, does this need to be a screen? Like, does it even need to be a thing? Not everything needs to be a screen. I would almost call it like a no interface philosophy. If it doesn't have to exist, then that's a win. That makes things more intuitive. The experience that I had at Denver with your class, and I think we actually did that internship together where we like continued that kind of work with DCIL. I don't remember.
Yep. Disability Center.
Disability Center, yeah.
For independent living.
Those types of projects where you're having to go and like really dig in. Now, how do you implement it? Like that's the other side of things. It's like, how does it actually get implemented? If you're designing an app, how do you make sure that it gets developed the way that you designed it? And then how do you make sure that people are using it the way that you thought they would use it? So there's just a lot of like that life cycle stuff. They don't really teach you.
Yeah, it's like a lot of that, especially with it, you take it to the design stage and then wanted to see it into development and and then see it out there in the real world. Like, yeah, those are definitely challenges for education. Yeah. So you've certainly come a long way. And one thing we haven't touched on, which I'd like to hear about, is way back before DU. Like when we talked earlier, I think you mentioned about deciding to study art and design, and how was that? How did your friends and family take that?
Yeah, no, my dad was a engineer through and through. And he basically he worked on rockets, like literal, like,
literally a rocket scientist.
right, yeah, like but mostly like critical systems type of engineering. We had a lot of good discussions over my math homework.
Did you get an A in math in high school?
I did, yes.
Oh, nice.
And honestly, like, I can probably credit his influence for really being maybe more analytical in terms of system thinking. I was always really detailed and like really artistic, able to kind of represent things pretty well. I remember sketching my first logo.
How old were you?
In preschool or kindergarten. It was the Batman logo.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
The movie, the 89 was it came out. So
yeah, Tim Burton.
I was like obsessed. I was obsessed with that logo, drawing it out. And so I've always been inclined. I can remember even back in like middle school being like, I want to do branding basicon, or like design work.
Did you take art classes in high school?
Yeah.
Like officially?
Yeah.
You took, yeah.
Yeah, it's like we had art. So I always made sure I was taking an art class. And my teachers actually saw me as a very good proponent for the arts. Because I was always really into it. I remember we had this one teacher who was very new to teaching, so she was bringing a lot of those college, what she was doing in college, and I was like, yes, I like, yeah, I'm on board with that. Like, let's do that. Let's let's do these projects. Growing up in the Bay Area in California, literally down the street from Steve Jobs' garage, or like, where Google is now, just accessing faculty throughout grade school that knew computers and knew design and was like pushing that. I remember in middle school, I designed my first website, and that was part of a class. But yeah, in terms of family and that dynamic, it took some selling.
Yeah.
My family that I wasn't going to be a starving artist on the street. I did have external sort of friend of the family advocate that was very helpful. I actually went and took my meager sort of portfolio to actually another high school with my family, and as a validation of, yes, I have some talent and can make a go of this.
I'm going to end with the pop quiz section of the interview. Favorite work beverage?
Oh, I get in real trouble with my venti iced coffees.
All right. So what about after work beverage?
I guess if you're talking about like, so like whiskey,
whiskey,
really into bourbon and I guess Scotch. I went to Scotland and
did you do a whiskey, like a Scotch whiskey tour?
Yeah,
the different
distilleries? Well, the whole golf and
right,
Scotch whiskey experience.
What about sketchbook? Blank or gridded?
Dotted.
Sort of like a grid. All right. User flows or information architecture? Which one? Well, you got to pick one. Which one would you rather map out?
I do information architecture and then user flows.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I know we didn't talk about you're a musician as well. You play some music. So music genre you listen to while you're working?
Oh gosh, that's super eclectic. So I have a running playlist on Spotify with my cousin. We had this tradition growing up, and like he would just like send me music like on cassette.
Right.
I would send him stuff. We would sort of send each other music, and that's obviously transitioned over to Spotify now. And I don't even know how many songs.
Different genres though?
Oh, all over the place. 548 songs. So it's 39 hours of music.
That's a good road trip.
Ranging from like Gajira metal to, I mean, hip hop, like just all over the place.
All right. So yeah, we didn't talk about your other creativity, but you do play some music and there's some painting. You have a Instagram account where you it's more like fine artwork. So if you had to choose one, music or painting.
Oh gosh. I really enjoy playing music with other people, but that's just very hard to organize. It's very hard to organize at a level that is like creatively advancing. Like you could jam all day long. To really make music creatively and to produce it and put it out in the world is difficult. I was lucky enough to do that, in the last year or two with a friend of mine. I guess I'll plug it. Sick Oheso on Spotify, if you want to check it out, or if you just go to my website, I've got a link there. Collaborating at a certain level is hard, but painting or creative work, you can just pick that up and do it. I went from doing nothing for years to showing my work in a gallery and having it sell in like less than a year. I don't know. That's a toss up.
Depends on if there are people around. No people, painting, people, music.
Yeah.
All right. Last question. Laptop or desktop?
Laptop.
All right. We're going to wrap up. Any final thoughts? Then you have so much experience at this point. One final thought.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, everything, I guess I'll connect it with experience design. Everything is experience, and everything is valid experience, especially when you're transitioning. I brought work that I did in college into interviews for roles that may have required 5 years experience. I counted the work that I did in college as experience. Don't undervalue it. Everything that you're doing, if it's producing something, that's valuable. And that's something that you can use to talk about what you want to do in the future or where you want to go, or to inform you moving forward.
Well, thanks so much, Glenn. It's like tons of wisdom in this discussion. I think you should be a teacher. Hopefully you have an audience where you are that's getting all this knowledge. I appreciate your thoughts. Thanks so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, yeah, you're a big influence on it. So, again, something you stand up for, take credit for. I would definitely give a lot of credit for it. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. What did we learn from Glenn? Design is about people. Get to know the people that are part of the design challenges and design solutions. And be an advocate for yourself, your skills, your talent, and your projects. Thanks to Glen Carlson of Metabolon. If you have any comments or questions for me or any of the guests, please leave them in the comments. And subscribe so you can catch the next episode of Design Futures. Until next time, go learn something. Your future depends on it. Thanks for listening. See ya.